It's a good day to brew, baby. What is up, YouTube? It's your boy Millsy. I got the hometown commander back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew my version 1.0 deck list of the commander in front of us on my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing. And that's what we're doing here most days on the channel, outworking everybody I can. Today, we're actually doing an update, and Anim Pakal is actually a commander that I did cover back on Lost Caverns of Ixalan, but we're going to cover it again at the end of the year because I wanted to update it. This is a deck I really enjoyed this year, and I thought it'd be fun to go back and kind of see what we can add to it from the newer sets. Nim calls a Boros human soldier, says whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, we put a counter on Anim Pakal, and then make X 1/1 gnomes that are tapped at attacking, where X is the number of counters on Anim Pakal. So, Anim Pakal has been a mainstay in a couple tokens decks I have. But what I like so much about Anim Pakal is she doesn't have to attack in order to get her ability. This makes it really useful because if we get her town on turn 3 with a creature that can attack, we can start getting the ball rolling. The next thing is they do come in tapped and attacking, right? So they can get around certain effects that care about creatures declaring attacks, but we want to try to buff them, right? So they're coming in bigger than 1/1s and really hitting into our opponents. They are artifacts. We could care about things like that as well. But also because Anim Pakal puts counters on herself, we can make it so that as Anim Pakal gets more and more counters, she herself could become a threat to do other things. That's what we're going to hope to talk about in this one. So let's jump in. The first section here is all about tokens mattering. We do have a ton of these tokens coming in. Adeline may look odd, but I think the good thing about Adeline is it's just going to make more tokens to get involved, more tokens to help us deal damage. I think Adeline fits really well with Arabella beside it, which as long as we're not buffing our gnomes at all, Arabella can deal some big damage. Whenever it attacks, deals X to each opponent, we gain X, where X is the number of creatures we control power 2 or less. So if we're not buffing these gnomes every turn, right, we're getting more and more of that life loss and that life gain for us. Cyberman Patrol is kind of an interesting one, giving all of our gnomes Afflict 3. So whenever a creature with Afflict 3 becomes blocked, defending player loses 3 life. This kind of fits a fun buff on them in the sense that they have to decide do they want to block a trade and take the 3 or just let the 1 or 2 go through, right? Giving a fun mechanical way to still make sure we get damage through. Devilish Valet is a really interesting creature. Whenever another creature comes in, you double its power, making it a huge threat in this deck. If you have 6 or 7 gnomes come in, I mean, you could see Devilish Valet get huge one-shotting a player, right? Because it has trample. So Devilish Valet is a nice tool for us. It is unfortunately 3 toughness, right? So our opponents could still block and take out the Valet. But I think the idea is it won't matter, right? Because we'll have its power be so big that our opponents are taking a massive amount of damage otherwise. I think Devilish Valet is also a nice attacker if an opponent's wide open. Get that chip in, don't have to worry about it dying and still getting the big damage. Gold Knight Commander is another great one. Whenever another creature comes in under our control, all other creatures we control get +1/+1. So if we make 5 gnomes, +5/+5 to the entire board. That's beautiful. Kind of being a small Cathar's Crusade type effect, but can really matter in a combat, especially if we start making 9-10 gnomes a turn, right? We can start to see where this is going to spread out and become really problematic for our opponents. Guide of Souls, these Soul Sister effects are kind of interesting, right? Because we're making batches of these gnomes at a time, but it says whenever another creature comes in, we gain a life and get an energy. This is the only energy card in the deck, but whenever we attack in general, we can pay 3 energy. If we do, we put 2 counters and a flying counter on target attacking creature. So this is great for Anim Pakal because we could put this on the stack above Anim Pakal's effect, put the counters on Anim Pakal, get it in the air, make it a little bit harder to deal with. And then Anim Pakal makes all of our gnomes, right, gaining us more life, getting us more energy. And then Guide of Souls could be passing around, right, those counters and that flying every turn. Caretaker's Talent can get us a card on each of our turns because we're going to be making those gnomes. And if we get it up to level 3, we can buff all of our creatures. And then Impact Tremors and War Leader's Call are kind of a symptomatic of the one thing we're going to be doing, which is trying to take advantage of those gnomes coming in, each of them dealing 1 damage to each opponent whenever a creature comes in, means that 7 gnomes coming in is 7 damage before we even get to combat damage, right? We do have a few of these effects in the deck. My deck isn't as focused on this, but I think this could be an easy way for you to spin it a little bit more if that's what you want to do. But getting into counters mattering, I think there's two ways to look at this. You could look at it, all we're going to care about is just an Anim Pakal having counters, or how do I get counters on more of my board, right? One of the cards that I've loved playing in Anim Pakal on Arena in the Brawl format is Invasion of Golbakhan. On the front side, it's kind of this weird card where you pick a card out of somebody's hand and it costs 2 more to cast, which isn't as good in Commander as it is in 1v1, but it is a halfway relevant effect. But the one we really care about is Light Shield right in the backside. Whenever at the beginning of your end step, you put a counter on each creature that attacked this turn. Now we have a way to spread out the counters, right? And then for free, we could sacrifice it to give all of our creatures hexproof and indestructible. A great way to protect our board from a good amount of the board wipes that are out there. And I kind of like this as one of the ways we can spread counters around our entire board. So then we have a couple creatures that say, well, each creature we control the counter on it has something. Battle Priest gives it lifelink. Falconer gives them flying. Envoy of the Ancestors gives them lifelink. So here's ways to not only give an Anim Pakal these effects, right, to help protect it, but give all the other creatures we have that have counters on them that. Lae'zel, instead of an Anim Pakal getting 1 counter each turn, is going to get 2 instead. And every time a counter will be put on anyone, they get an extra one. So you could start to see where now Anim Pakal is going from from 1 to 3 to, that's going to start ramping up more exponentially, getting more and more gnomes on our side. Angel Fire Ignition is an interesting spell, putting 2 counters on a creature, giving it Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, Indestructible, and Haste on a turn. This feels great on an Anim Pakal, again, to jumpstart us by 2 more counters, right? 3 technically, right, with that turn's attack. And you're getting life and dealing big damage, and the best part is you could flash it back out of the graveyard to do it again. Collector's Cage is something I wanted to try. I feel like it has the pieces to be here. You can pay 1 and tap it to put a counter on a creature. Then if we have 3 or more creatures with different powers, we can play the exiled card with this without paying its mana cost. It has Hideaway. This is a nice ability because we're going to always want to put a counter on an Anim Pakal anyway, right, to get more gnomes. But we could take advantage of the cage, putting counters on different creatures to get to that, so it can fulfill the Hideaway cost, or the Hideaway side of this, right, and play the card for free. And then every turn, Collector's Cage for just 1 mana can keep growing an Anim Pakal, making sure we get more and more gnomes. We're playing a pair of equipment here in Ring of Thune. I think it's Ring of Valkis on the next one, where the equipped creature has an ability, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, they get a +1/+1 counter if they're a certain color. For Ring of Thune, it's white, which an Anim Pakal is, right? So an Anim Pakal will get that each turn. Ring of Valkis gives haste, and if it's red, it gets counter. So, right, both of these can add counters to an Anim Pakal, making sure that she grows faster and faster. Noble Heritage is probably a card I should have looked at the first time around, but I think makes a ton of sense. It says commander creatures you own have the following ability. So as long as Heritage and an Anim Pakal are out at the same time, an Anim Pakal is going to have, whenever this creature enters in the beginning of your upkeep, each player may put 2 counters on a creature they control. For each opponent who does, we gain protection from that player until your next turn. So basically, we can get protected a little bit from that player, and we can just start adding 2 counters to a Anim Pakal every turn, or spread them out depending on what we want to do. But I think what's important is 2 mana to get 2 extra counters, 2 extra gnomes, right? You can start to see how that's going to hide up for us. And I think the easiest way to get counters on all of our creatures, other than Cathar's Crusade, which is in the deck, we'll talk about it later, I think, is Virtual Loyalty. Beginning our end step, you put a counter on each creature we control and we untap them. So effectively, it gives them Vigilance and a counter every turn, making those things like Absent Falconer, Battle Priest, and Envoy even better when they start affecting our gnomes as well. I called this slide Value Adders because I didn't really know what to say about each of these 3 individually, but I think they're all 3 really key pieces. Starting with Bosri on the left, the +1 gives a counter to a creature and gives it indestructible. This feels, until the end of turn, this feels great for a Anim Pakal. That way a Anim Pakal can be attacking as well, threatening our opponents with commander damage, getting damage in with its growing power and toughness, right? The -2 is kind of fun. Whenever 1 or more non-token creatures attack, we make that many soldiers that are tapped and attacking. So here's some more tokens we can make that get involved. Again, this to me works well with things like Cathar's Crusade or Gold Knight Commander, right? Getting more tokens and a bigger buff. And then if we can get up to the emblem, this is the beginning of combat on your turn, you make a soldier and put a counter on each creature you control. So again, there's another way to spread them out. Aroas, I think if you've played a Boros deck and you've seen Aroas is very good at what it does. And that's giving all your creatures menace and effectively preventing all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking creatures you control. This is a great way to pretty much make sure that you get to swing as much as you want and not have to worry about blocks, as your creatures can just force your opponent to block or take the damage. And then when you get to that devotion, Erois becomes a 7/4 with Menace Indestructible. It's even harder to deal with, right? And what I like about Erois in a lot of ways is it may look like a real threat, and it is a real threat. Hopefully, it's the threat that takes the removal over Anim Pakal. And hopefully we can get the rest of the board set up and someone picks off Erois instead of Anim Pakal. Throne of the God Pharaoh is a card that I think works really, really well here since all those gnomes come in tapped and attacking. It says at the beginning of our end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures we control. This always is going to grow every turn, right? Because we want to be attacking. We're a deck that wants to attack. And I think the nice part about Throne of the God Pharaoh is basically, unless those gnomes die unless they die in combat, right? They're going to be affecting Throne every turn, right? Meaning more and more damage is going to go through after we've already dealt with combat. But let's get into finishing it off, right? How are we going to hit harder? How are we going to hurt our opponents some more when we get into combat? I think something like Nyali makes sense, giving all of our gnomes double strike. That way, even if they become 2/2s, that's still 2 with double strike, right? Being harder to block for our opponents. Banner of Kinship feels great. I think you want to put it down on a turn after you generate some gnomes, so that way Banner always has a few counters on it. And then every gnome that comes in is going to have that. You don't want to call human, I think, in the deck like this, where we have other creatures. I think we want to call gnome. Make sure all those gnomes are coming in with that buff, and they start becoming a real problem. Chroma's Will is a nice finisher in a lot of the decks. You can look at it two ways. It can either be a protection spell, or it can be a finisher. It says choose one. If you control your commander, you can pick both. The top half gives flying, vigilance, and double strike to all of your creatures. The bottom half gives lifelink, indestructible, and protection from each color until your end step. I like this because if you can technically choose both, get a bunch of abilities on all your creatures, and you're gaining a ton of life and dealing a ton of damage to your opponent, which is nice because you can do this after the attacks are declared, getting all those gnomes into the air, right, and dealing more damage. Eldrazi Monument makes a ton of sense here, giving our creatures +1/+1 flying and indestructible. So at minimum, right, those are 2/2 gnomes now in the air. Beginning our upkeep, we have to sack creature. If we don't, we sacrifice Eldrazi Monument, but that's okay because it's going to pay for itself very quickly every turn as we're getting our creatures into the air. Patchwork Banner, again, choose gnome. You get a mana of any color, but the point is +1/+1 to all gnomes. Now they're hitting even harder. And then there's the Cathar's Crusade to kind of mirror that virtual loyalty. Whenever a creature comes in, put a counter on each creature you control. So this kind of works more like like Gold Knight Commander, but instead of just a buff, they get counters. Now this style of game plan, these incremental buffs, right, will kind of weed cards like Arabella out of being a slam dunk threat in the late game. But I think that's okay, right? We want the gnomes to get bigger because we want them to hit harder. And if we don't do that, then we'll need more gnomes, right, to finish a game. And I think the point is that we want them to get bigger as soon as we can. Following the White Tree, giving a buff across the board, a little bit of protection to our legendary creatures. Inspiring Leader, as long as an input calls out, all tokens get +2/+2, right? Those gnomes coming in as 3/3s is great. That's big damage. And then Intangible Virtue, giving all of our tokens +1/+1 and vigilance. Now, right, Intangible, little bit of a nombo with Throne of the God Pharaoh. But you have to remember that the tokens come in tapped and attacking. So they're going to come in tapped and attacking no matter what, whether or not they have vigilance. So it's still a little bit of a nombo, but it still works because it can still benefit us from the gnomes that are coming in, right, for Throne of the God Pharaoh. This is also only tokens. So if we have our non-token creatures attacking with an Anim Pakal as well, they will still count for the throne as well. So although there's some of a little nombo there, I don't think it matters with how many gnomes in the mid to late game we could be making. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again. No deck's ever complete. This is my update, and still really, a shot at the deck without testing. And I think in testing, we would look to learn a lot from the deck in one of 3 different camps. One, like the Agate Instigator there on the left, do we need more of this damage on creatures coming in? I do have a few cards in the deck. It's not like it's only Impact Tremors and Warleader's Call. There's a few more. But the point is, do we need more of it? Do we need to stack up the Perforoses and the Witty Roastmasters as well? Do we really need to go all in on these abilities since it's going to be happening every turn? Or is it enough to focus more on the buffs, like with something like Coat of Arms there in the middle? We have the Banner, which is kind of the pseudo reprint of Coat of Arms, but Coat of Arms is very good at what it does, giving +1/+1 for each creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature that shares a type with it. Meaning the more gnomes we have, the bigger they get. I think the incremental, right, bonus from all the other things that we have that buff our gnomes should be enough. But the question is, do we need something like Coat of Arms to have a bigger button to end the game? Like, I think like something like Eldrazi Monument is going to help. Getting them in the air, getting them Menace with Aroas are the things that I think are going to be able to push the tide over on our opponents. But the question is, do we need more of it? And then Dolmen Gate is just another copy of that Aroas style ability. Stopping our creatures that are attacking from getting killed in combat seems really important when we have a ton of tokens laying around that we want to attack with again. We want to get them in for more damage. We want to do more with them. And if keeping them alive is the thing that matters, right, maybe we want to do that. I think I am more interested in these two, in the Coat and in the Instigator, than I am in the Dolmen Gate, because I think the gnomes are a little bit expendable, since we know, right, we're always going to be making more as long as we can protect an Anim Pakal. And I think that's the other thing I'm looking for in testing is, can I keep an Anim Pakal on the battlefield to get this turn overturned? But let's do what we love doing the most on the channel. Let's get into our playtest. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Inspiring Leader. Here's Tempered Steel, which we didn't talk about, but another great buff, giving all of our artifact creatures +2/+2, so specifically our gnomes, right? And then Virtual Loyalty. We're missing that second white for Virtual Loyalty. We got a lot of way to go in getting ourselves up there. Turn 1, we see Cathar's Crusade. Okay, so we're getting there, right? We just need that second white for both of them, and I think we're going to be in good shape. Turn 2, we can actually wait and use that to make the 2/2 Knight. Basically, the reason we want to do that on our opponent's turns, or I guess we could do it on our turn, but really we want to do it on the turn before ours, is so that way here on turn 3, right, we can get a Anim Pakal down, go to combat, have the Knight attack, you know, and Anim Pakal gets that counter, makes us that gnome, right, and now we're off to the races, right? Now we're getting the party started, we're working our way up there. Now we can start, you know, focusing on these buffs type things as we're getting the process started. Remember, we have to attack with a non-gnome creature to do it, which is why non-gnome creatures are so important, because we don't care if they live once an Anim Pakal, right, gets to a certain step. Devilish Valley is interesting here. We're not there yet, but I think Devilish Valley can really become a threat. I think I like the idea of something like Absent Falconer here. This would get an Anim Pakal in the air, make it even safer to attack. Inspiring Leader is going to make, right, all of those gnomes 3/3s. If this Knight's still around, right, it becomes a 4/4. I think that's a good mix. If the Knight survived, I think I Inspiring Leader, right? Have the Knight attack, keep an Anim Pakal safe, get some more goblins, or some more gnomes. If the Knight didn't survive, I think I Absent Falconer to get an Anim Pakal in the air, have a better chance to get in for damage. But we'll go here in this scenario, we'll say it's the world where the Knight did survive on that turn 3 attack, because I'm sure we could potentially pick an opponent, right? Anim Pakal gets the counter, we make 2 more gnomes, remember they're 3/3s now because of Inspiring Leader, you know, take the attacks. Come in for our turn. We didn't hit the white, we didn't hit the land, but we did hit the Boros Signet. So now next turn, right, we have access to the Cathar's Crusade, which I think is the one we really care about. Here, though, just 3 mana. And if I use the 2 red to pay for it, I can actually pay for the Tempered Steel, which I think makes the most sense this turn. Again, I think an Anim Pakal might be able to attack here on turn 5 as a 3/4 that's going to turn into a 4/5, right? Making 3 more gnomes, right? Now these gnomes are 6/6s, right? So now they're getting to be real threats to our opponent's, you know, attack. We may have a world where we could take somebody out here on turn 5, depending on who we're attacking, who's open, what their blocks are like. It would let the table know we're a threat, right? But I think it's what you need to do in a deck like this. You need to pick the first person to knock down and kind of knock people out when you can. I think there's an argument for spreading the love, but I kind of would rather knock somebody out first. It just makes our next attacks even easier, because this Cathar's Crusade may just end the game next turn. Think about it. If no one touches our board, we Cathar's Crusade, right, for 5 mana, which we have all of. Go to combat. Everybody's going to attack because they're going to get a huge buff. And Anim Pakal gets the counter. There's 4 more gnomes, and those gnomes coming in adds 4 counters to everything. So now, instead of these all being 6/6s, they're all now 10/10s. And now, if you didn't knock somebody out last turn, you should sure as heck be knocking at least one or if not both the players left this turn. And this is where I think this deck is so fun to me. Yes, it's a linear deck that is easy to derail, right? With something like getting rid of an Anim Pakal. But the point is that if you can protect an Anim Pakal, right, it's going to become a threat. I think we've kind of demonstrated what we want to on that one. Let's jump into our next playtest. Keep it a 3-lander with Eldrazi Monument, Wear and Tear for a little bit of removal. Felidar Retreat can be a counter on all of our creatures in Vigilance or a cat token, and then Envoy the Ancestors to give an Anim Pakal lifelink, whatever we get there, so not bad. We see the Ring of Valkus this time. I like this because we can use it to equip to an Anim Pakal to give it haste if we wanted to. I think that's what we play this turn, though. Dispatch, this is a great card in this deck. It's a removal spell. It taps target creature, but if we have 3 or more artifacts, it just turns into exile creature. It turns into Swords of Plowshares or Path to Exile without any of the downside. And we're almost always going to have 3 or more artifacts. So Dispatch, great, right? In our deck. Here, I'm almost kind of thinking Envoy. I kind of love the world where we get Ring of Valkus on an Anim Pakal, give it haste, and immediately give it lifelink. Because I guess an Anim Pakal wants to... we need an Anim Pakal to attack. I don't think there's any way to attack this turn, right? No matter what. So I'm thinking that, because then on this turn, Anim Pakal, give it haste, right? It gets the counter, making the gnome this turn. Now it has lifelink, right? People may be a little bit more adept to block it. I mean, I don't know. Turn 4, I'm sure we can find a safe place to attack with it, giving it lifelink, right? Gaining a couple life back. We get our gnome started. And now this turn, we're 1 artifact away from Dispatch being live. But I think this is just Eldrazi Monument, right? Giving all creatures +1/+1 in flank. Sorry, at the start of our upkeep, Valkus gives it an Anim Pakal counter, but not just tokens, all of our creatures have flying indestructible. So now even Envoy's in the air. Right, we go to combat, and Anim Pakal gets another counter, 3 more gnomes, they're now all in the air. Right, now we're starting to threaten the board, right? We're starting to start become a problem. Start our upkeep, right? We got to get rid of a creature for the monument. 6 mana now. I guess it would make sense to play that Felidar Retreat first. Then play the Sundown Pass, and I would probably just put a counter on all our creatures, give them Vigilance. Play the Impact Tremors with our other 2 mana, right? Go to combat. Counter for an Anim Pakal. 5 gnomes, 5 damage to everybody with Impact Tremors. Now there's 10 more, 10 more power of gnomes on the battlefield. These all have +1/+1, the counter Vigilance because of Felidar Retreat. These don't, but that's A-okay. Now we're putting more power on the board. Remember that those ones with counters on them now have lifelink because of Envoy. And now you can see we're starting to really get some good value right going. We have a little bit of removal in our hand. The only thing we're missing is protection, but that's okay. There are spells in the deck we just didn't see in this time around. And now I think we're in the same spot where we're 1 turn away from being a real threat. Yes, these are only 2/2s at the moment, but they are in the air, which is relevant, right, for some of our opponents that aren't going to be able to deal with our creatures in the air. Here, again, we put a counter on all of our creatures, give them Vigilance. Counter from an Anim Pakal for the Thune, right? Go to combat, another one, and here's 8 more gnomes, 8 damage from the Impact Tremor, 16 more power in the air. And I mean, this is what we want to do. Overwhelm the board, go forward. Again, I think we've kind of gotten to where we need to see with this playtest. Again, showing us a little bit different of a path to that limit. Well, let's go one more. So we're trying to do on the channel, going up to 3 playtests. A 3-lander with Angel Fire Ignition, Siege Veteran, which could put an extra counter on a creature each turn. And then Gold Knight and Eldrazi Monument seems like a great thing get ourselves up to. Turn 1, we draw Lae'zel. Remember, that's the creature that can start adding extra counters every time we put a counter on something. I don't think we have anything to do here. Turn 2. Turn 3, I mean, I'm kind of thinking Lae'zel, since we can't even attack this turn anyway. I guess there's the argument to Anim Pakal into Angel Fire. But I kind of like the idea that Lae'zel can attack, right? It's a 3/3, which means I think even here on turn 4, Lae'zel should be okay, right, to take an attack this turn. Again, put 2 instead of 1, get 2 gnomes down, get the party going. We missed our land drop, which kind of stinks. It's okay for the moment, but if we miss it for too many turns, it's a big deal. Again, unfortunately, here we miss it again. But I think we just Angel Fire on Anim Pakal, adding 3 counters instead of 2 because of Lae'zel. And then Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, Indestructible Haste. Then remember, we go to combat, we get 2 counters instead of 1 because of Lae'zel. Now we're making 7 gnomes, right? Get in for some damage, right? Now we're having real threats with this Anim Pakal, right? I mean, ideally we need the land here. Of course, we don't get it again. Such be life. I think here I would probably just go Intangible Virtue. At least give these ones the +1/+1. Again, 2 more counters. Now we're making 9 gnomes, so 18 extra power on the board. And I think you could start to see where next turn, right, 1 more mana for that Akroma's Will is probably just game on the spot. If not, Golden Knight Commander, then buffing our entire board. Actually, the Golden Knight Commander may even lead to more damage, right, depending on what we choose. But I hope that kind of shows you that we're trying to be a linear, faster deck that's trying to get to what we're trying to get to fun, get to combat, and have some fun. But I'd love to know what you think of Anim Pakal down in the comment section below, and I will catch you guys next time.